The flour dust caught in the morning light streaming through the bakery window. And Rose Warren stood at the counter with her hands dusted white, watching another group of young ladies parade past in their Sunday finest, even though it was only Thursday. They were the ones the ranchers and merchants courted, the ones with delicate features and ribbons in their hair, while she remained invisible behind her father's counter in Madisonville, Texas, a town that had grown from nothing into something substantial by 1878. Rose had stopped looking in mirrors years ago. She knew what she would see: a face too long, eyes too small and set too close together, a nose that bent slightly to the left from when she had fallen as a child, and a mouth that seemed permanently turned downward even when she tried to smile. Her brown hair refused to curl no matter how many rags her mother had tied in it before she passed, and her figure was what the charitable ladies called sturdy. She was 22 years old and had never received a single caller, not one, despite her father owning the most successful bakery in 3 counties. "Rose, we need more sourdough loaves for the afternoon rush," her father called from the back room where the ovens blazed hot enough to make the whole building sweat. "Yes, Papa," she called back, wiping her hands on her apron. The morning had already been long, starting before dawn as it always did, kneading dough until her arms ached and decorating cakes for the Henderson wedding that weekend. Not her wedding, never her wedding, but she had become quite skilled at creating beautiful things for other people's celebrations. The bell above the door chimed, and Rose looked up to see Thomas Fletcher walk in, his hat in his hands. Thomas was a rancher who lived about 10 miles outside of town, a quiet man in his mid-20s who came in every Thursday like clockwork to buy bread and whatever sweet goods caught his eye. He was tall, lean from hard work, with sun-weathered skin and dark hair that always looked like he had tried to comb it but had given up halfway through. His clothes were clean but worn, and he moved with a careful economy of motion that suggested he thought through everything before he did it. "Morning, Miss Warren," he said, his voice low and rough like gravel under wagon wheels. "Good morning, Mr. Fletcher. Your usual." She had his order memorized: 2 loaves of sourdough, 1 of rye, and something sweet that varied week to week. "Yes, madam. And I was wondering if you had any of those molasses cookies, the ones with the crinkled tops." Rose felt her heart do something strange in her chest. Those were her own recipe, something she had developed through years of experimentation. Most customers never noticed who had made what, but Thomas Fletcher always seemed to know which items were hers. "I made a fresh batch this morning. Then I will take a dozen if you can spare them." She wrapped everything carefully in brown paper, tying the packages with string. Her hands were not delicate, not the soft white hands of the women who took tea in the hotel parlor, but strong and capable, marked with small scars from hot pans and the occasional knife slip. She noticed Thomas watching her hands as she worked, though she could not imagine why. "That will be $1.15, she said, sliding the packages across the counter. Thomas counted out the coins carefully. "I appreciate your baking, Miss Warren. You have a real gift." The compliment settled somewhere in her chest, warm and unfamiliar. "Thank you, Mr. Fletcher." "That is kind of you to say." He nodded, gathered his packages, and turned to leave. At the door he paused and looked back. "I mean it. There is real beauty in what you create." Then he was gone, the bell chiming behind him, and Rose stood there with flour on her hands and something like hope flickering in her chest, small and tentative as a candle flame in the wind. The afternoon passed in its usual rhythm. Mrs. Henderson came in to fuss over the wedding cake design, changing her mind 3 times about the icing roses. Young Billy Martin bought a penny candy stick with coins he had obviously been saving. The Reverend Patterson picked up the communion bread and spoke at length about his upcoming sermon while Rose nodded and smiled and thought about other things. It was near closing time when Susanna Price swept in with her mother, both of them dressed in the kind of elaborate day dresses that Rose saw in the catalogs but would never have occasion to wear. Susanna was everything Rose was not: petite, blonde, with rosebud lips and eyes like blue china. She had 3 separate suitors currently competing for her attention, and she wore that fact like the expensive lace at her collar. "Rose Warren, we need a dozen tea cakes for tomorrow," Mrs. Price announced, not asked. "We are hosting the Ladies' Auxiliary Society, and I suppose your father's baking will have to do." "Of course, Mrs. Price. What flavor would you prefer?" "Lemon, I should think. Nothing too exotic. Some of us have refined palates." The words were pointed, as they always were. Mrs. Price had never forgiven Rose's father for refusing to lower his prices for her personal orders, insisting that everyone pay the same fare rate. Susanna drifted around the shop, her fingers trailing over the display case. "Mama, look at these sad little attempts at decoration." "Rose, dear, did you really think those sugar flowers looked realistic?" Rose had spent 2 hours on those sugar flowers for the Harper christening cake. "I will try to do better next time, Miss Price." "I doubt it, but never mind. Not everyone can have an artistic sensibility. Some of us are simply meant for more practical purposes." Susanna's smile was sweet as poisoned honey. "I suppose it is fortunate you have a trade, since you will need some way to support yourself. Thomas Fletcher came by our house yesterday, did you know? Papa is considering his offer." Rose's hand stilled on the order ledger. "I was not aware." "Oh yes, he is quite a prosperous rancher, they say. His land runs all the way to Coyote Creek. Not the most charming man, so quiet and serious, but Papa says he has good prospects. I have not decided if I will accept him yet. I do have other options." Each word landed like a stone in Rose's stomach. Of course, Thomas Fletcher would court Susanna Price. Every man in town wanted Susanna Price. What had Rose been thinking, letting herself feel that small flutter of hope just because he had complimented her cookies? "Your tea cakes will be ready tomorrow morning," Rose said, her voice flat. After they left, Rose locked the door and leaned against it, closing her eyes. She was not going to cry. She had learned years ago that crying changed nothing. She was plain Rose Warren, the baker's daughter, useful for bread and cakes but not for loving. That was simply the truth of her life, and she had accepted it. Except acceptance felt harder tonight than it usually did. Her father found her there a few minutes later. George Warren was a broad man with flour permanently embedded in the creases of his hands and kindness permanently embedded in his heart. He had raised Rose alone after her mother died of fever when Rose was 12, and he had never once made her feel like she was anything less than his greatest treasure. "Rose girl, why are you standing in the dark?" "Just tired, Papa. It was a long day." He studied her with eyes that saw too much. "That Price woman came by, did she not? I heard her voice. She ordered tea cakes. That woman has a tongue sharp enough to slice bread." He put his arm around her shoulders. "Do not let her get to you." "I do not, Papa. I am fine." But she was not fine. That night, lying in her narrow bed in the room above the bakery, Rose let herself imagine for just a moment what it would be like to be the kind of woman men like Thomas Fletcher courted. To be small and pretty and delicate. To have someone look at her and see beauty instead of utility. Then she pushed the thoughts away and went to sleep, because morning came early and the bread would not bake itself. Thursday arrived again, as Thursdays always did. Rose had not let herself think about Thomas Fletcher all week, or at least she had tried not to think about him. She had heard through the town gossip that he had indeed gone to speak with Susanna's father, though no official announcement had been made. Susanna had been holding court at the hotel restaurant, making all the other young ladies jealous with hints and suggestions. Rose was decorating a birthday cake when the bell chimed. She looked up, expecting Mrs. Henderson with another cake change, and found Thomas Fletcher standing in the doorway. He looked different somehow. More nervous, maybe, though his expression remained as still and calm as always. "Good morning, Miss Warren." "Good morning, Mr. Fletcher." She set down her piping bag, wiping her hands. "Your usual order." "Yes, and I was wondering." He paused, turning his hat in his hands. "I was wondering if I might have a word with you if you have time." Rose's heart started beating faster. This was it, then. He was going to tell her himself that he was courting Susanna, probably because he thought it was the polite thing to do since he was a regular customer. Or maybe he wanted to order a wedding cake, and Susanna had refused to set foot in the bakery herself. Of course. "Let me get your order together first." She wrapped the bread with trembling hands, though she tried to keep them steady. When she placed the packages on the counter, Thomas made no move to take them. "Miss Warren, I know I am not a man of many words, never have been, but I want to say something clear, and I am going to do my best." He took a breath. "I think you are the most beautiful woman I have ever seen." Rose froze. The words made no sense. "I am sorry, what?" "I know that might sound strange. I know other folks do not see what I see. But when I watch you work, when I see how you create something from nothing, how your whole face changes when you are concentrating on getting something just right, I cannot imagine anything more beautiful. Mr. Fletcher, if this is some kind of joke, no joke. I am not a joking man." He stepped closer to the counter. "I have been coming here every Thursday for 2 years now, not because I need bread, though your bread is the finest I have ever tasted. I come because it is the only time I am certain to see you." Rose could not breathe properly. "But you went to see Susanna Price's father." Thomas looked genuinely confused for a moment, then his expression cleared. "Ah, yes, I did. Because John Price owns the land adjacent to mine, and I wanted to negotiate purchasing his eastern 40 acres. He accepted my offer." "I am not courting his daughter." "You are not, Miss Warren. I could not court Susanna Price if she were the last woman in Texas. She is pretty, I suppose, the way a painted picture is pretty. But you are real. You are talented and strong and capable. You create beauty every single day. You are patient with difficult customers and kind to children, and you never put on airs even though you have more skill in your smallest finger than most folks have in their whole body." Rose sat down heavily on the stool behind the counter. "No one has ever said such things to me." "Then no one has been paying proper attention." Thomas set his hat on the counter. "I know I am just a rancher. I am not wealthy, though I do well enough. I am not educated beyond basic schooling. I am quiet and I work hard, and I do not have much to offer except a decent house and good land and a heart that is already entirely yours if you want it. Mr. Fletcher, Thomas, please." Thomas. His name felt strange and wonderful on her tongue. "I do not understand. I am not pretty. Everyone in town knows that. I am too plain, too sturdy, too practical. I am the baker's daughter that no one wants." Thomas leaned on the counter, and his eyes were the warmest brown she had ever seen, like sunlight through honey. "You are Rose Warren, and you are exactly what I want. You are what I have wanted since the first day I walked in here and you smiled at me like I was worth smiling at. I am not asking you to answer me right now. I know this is sudden, but I am asking if I might court you properly. Come calling, take you to church socials. Let me spend time getting to know you better, though I feel like I already know your heart from watching how you move through the world." The bakery door burst open, and George Warren came through covered in flour. "Rose, I need you to check the oven temperature. Something is not right with—" He stopped, taking in the scene. Thomas leaning on the counter, Rose sitting on her stool looking like she had been struck by lightning, the tension in the air thick enough to slice. "Am I interrupting something?" "Yes, sir, you are." Thomas straightened up. "Mr. Warren, I have just asked your daughter for permission to court her. I should have asked you first, I know that, but I wanted Rose to hear it from me directly. If she is willing, I would like your permission as well." George looked at Rose, his eyebrows raised in question. She nodded, still too stunned to speak properly. A smile broke across her father's flowery face. "Well now, Thomas Fletcher, I have watched you come in here every Thursday for 2 years, and I have seen the way you look at my daughter when you think no one is watching. I would be honored to have you court her, provided Rose is agreeable." "Rose?" Thomas asked, his voice soft. She found her voice finally, though it came out shakier than she wanted. "Yes, I am agreeable. I am very agreeable." The smile that crossed Thomas's face was like sunrise breaking over the prairie, transforming his whole expression. "Thank you, both of you. I will come calling Sunday afternoon if that suits." "That suits just fine," Rose said. And suddenly she was smiling too, really smiling, the kind of smile that came from somewhere deep inside where she had locked away all her hopes and dreams. After Thomas left, practically floating out the door despite his usual steady demeanor, George pulled his daughter into a flowery hug. "You see, I told you that you just needed someone with sense enough to see what was right in front of him. Papa, what do I do? I have never been courted before. I do not know how any of this works. You be yourself, Rose girl. That is who he wants to court. Just be yourself." Sunday afternoon arrived wrapped in golden autumn sunshine, the kind of day that made Texas almost forgivable for its brutal summers. Rose had changed her dress 3 times, finally settling on her blue calico because it was the newest, though it was still 2 years old, and had been made for practicality rather than fashion. She had pulled her hair back in her usual simple style, then attempted something more elaborate with pins, then given up and gone back to the usual style. She was not going to transform into Susanna Price no matter how many pins she used. Thomas arrived exactly on time, driving a wagon that was clean but clearly well used. He had dressed in what were obviously his best clothes: dark trousers, a white shirt, a vest that looked like it had been brushed within an inch of its life, and a string tie. His hair was combed more thoroughly than usual, though one piece in the back still stuck up a little. Rose found that piece of sticking-up hair endearing in a way she could not quite explain. "Miss Warren," he said, helping her up into the wagon seat with a steadiness that made her feel secure. "You look beautiful." She almost argued, almost pointed out all the ways she was not beautiful, then remembered her father's advice. "Be yourself." "Thank you, Thomas. You look very handsome." They drove out of town toward his ranch, and Thomas pointed out landmarks along the way. "That is where I found my first Mustang mare, half wild and half starved. She is the foundation of my whole horse herd now, and over there, that grove of cottonwoods, that is where I like to sit when I need to think. The creek runs through there and it is peaceful." "How long have you had your ranch?" "5 years now. I worked for the previous owner, old Samuel Foster, from the time I was 16. He had no children, and when he passed, he left me the land in his will. Said I had earned it with my work and my loyalty. Some folks in town thought he should have left it to distant cousins instead, but Samuel did not care much for his cousins. That must have been difficult, having people resent your good fortune." "It was. Still is, sometimes, but I learned early that you cannot control what people think of you. You can only control who you choose to be." They talked easily, the conversation flowing more naturally than Rose had expected. Thomas asked about her baking, really asked, wanting to know how she developed recipes and what she found most challenging and what her favorite things to make were. "I love making bread the most," she told him. "There is something almost magical about it. You take these basic ingredients, flour, water, salt, yeast, nothing special on their own. But you combine them in the right way, give them time and attention and care, and they transform into something that sustains life. Every loaf is a little miracle if you think about it." Thomas looked at her with such focused attention that she felt heat rise in her cheeks. "That is exactly how I feel about raising horses. You start with something wild and uncertain, and through patience and respect, you build a partnership. You do not break a horse's spirit. You earn its trust." His ranch, when they arrived, was nothing fancy but everything solid. The house was small but well-maintained, with a front porch that overlooked the rolling prairie. The barn was sturdy, the fences in good repair, the horses in the corral healthy and alert. It was the kind of place built by hard work and careful planning. "It is not much," Thomas said, and Rose heard uncertainty in his voice for the first time. "It is wonderful. You can see everything you have built here. That means something." He smiled, that sunrise smile again. "Come on, I will introduce you to the horses." Rose spent the afternoon learning about Thomas's world. He had 6 mares, 2 stallions, and several young horses in various stages of training. He showed her how he worked with them, his movements calm and patient, his voice a steady murmur that seemed to settle the animals' nerves. "You have a gift," Rose said, watching him work with a nervous yearling. "The same way you said I have a gift with baking. Maybe we all have gifts. Maybe the trick is finding someone who recognizes yours." He had prepared a picnic, which he admitted he had agonized over. "I am not much of a cook. I did not want to embarrass myself by serving you something terrible when you create such wonderful food every day." The simple meal of cheese, bread, apples, and smoked meat was perfect. They sat on a blanket near the creek, and Thomas told her about growing up in Missouri, the youngest of 6 children, how his family had moved to Texas hoping for opportunities and found them, though not in the ways they expected. "My parents both died during the cholera outbreak of '68, he said quietly. "My siblings scattered to different places. I was the only one who stayed in this area. Sometimes I wonder if I should have tried harder to keep everyone together, but we all needed to find our own paths, I suppose." "I am sorry. Losing your parents must have been terrible." "It was, but I think loss teaches us what matters, makes us appreciate what we have while we have it." He looked at her directly. "I do not take anything for granted, Rose. Not good fortune, not good land, and certainly not a good woman willing to spend time with me. I am the one who should feel grateful. You are the first person who has ever wanted to court me. Then every other man in Madisonville is a fool." They talked until the sun started its descent toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Thomas drove Rose back to town slowly, as if reluctant for the day to end. At the bakery door, he helped her down from the wagon and held her hand just a moment longer than necessary. "May I call on you again? I would like that very much. Next Sunday, then. Maybe we could attend church together and then take another drive." "Yes, Thomas, I would enjoy that." He tipped his hat and climbed back into the wagon, and Rose watched him drive away with her hand still tingling where he had held it. By Monday morning, the entire town knew that Thomas Fletcher was courting Rose Warren. The news spread through Madisonville like fire through dry grass, and Rose could feel the weight of people's curiosity and judgment everywhere she went. Mrs. Henderson actually asked, in a tone of genuine confusion, "But why would he court you when he could court any of the prettier girls?" The question hurt, but before Rose could formulate an answer, her father stepped in. Perhaps because my daughter has more to offer than just a face, Judith. Perhaps Thomas Fletcher is smart enough to value substance. Still, the comments kept coming. Susanna Price made sure to stop by the bakery with her mother, her expression sugary, sweet, and venomous. "Rose, darling, I heard the most amusing rumor. Surely Thomas Fletcher is not actually courting you. Mama, did you hear? Thomas Fletcher is courting the baker's daughter." "How extraordinary," Mrs. Price said, her tone making it clear she meant the opposite. "I suppose some men have unusual tastes. My cousin's husband kept pigs as pets after all. Some people are drawn to the practical and plain." Rose felt each word like a slap, but she kept her expression neutral as she wrapped their order. "Your tea cakes, Mrs. Price. That will be 75 cents. After they left, Rose allowed herself exactly 2 minutes in the back room to cry. Then she washed her face, straightened her apron, and went back to work. She would not let their cruelty destroy the small happiness beginning to bloom in her chest. Thomas came by on Thursday as usual, and the bakery happened to be full of customers when he arrived. Rose felt every eye turn toward them as he approached the counter. "Good morning, Miss Warren," he said, his voice carrying through the suddenly quiet shop. "I wanted to get my usual order, and I wanted everyone here to know how fortunate I feel that you have agreed to let me court you." The shop stayed quiet. Rose could feel her face burning. "Thomas, you do not have to." "Yes, I do." He turned to face the other customers. "I know some of you think it is strange that I am courting Rose. I know some of you think I could do better, or that she could do better, or whatever it is folks like to gossip about. But I am going to say this once, plain and clear. Rose Warren is the finest woman I have ever known. She is talented and kind and strong. She makes every day brighter just by existing in the world. And if anyone has a problem with me courting her, I invite you to keep it to yourself, because I am not interested in hearing it." He turned back to Rose, and his expression softened. "Now, could I please have my usual order and maybe an extra dozen of those molasses cookies? I find I cannot get enough of them." Rose wrapped his order with shaking hands, and when she gave him the packages, he took her hand and squeezed it gently before leaving. The shop stayed silent for about 3 seconds after the door closed behind him, then erupted in whispers. But Rose did not care about the whispers. She just kept feeling the warmth of his hand around hers, and the way he had defended her in front of everyone. The next Sunday, Thomas took her to church. They sat together in the Warren family pew, and Rose tried not to notice the way people stared and whispered behind their hands. After the service, Thomas kept his hand at the small of her back, a steady presence as they navigated through the crowd. Several people stopped to speak with them. Some were genuinely kind, like old Mrs. Patterson, who squeezed Rose's hand and said, "You make a lovely couple." Others were less kind, their comments carefully worded to sound polite while carrying barbs underneath. "Thomas, what a surprise to see you courting," said James Martin, the banker's son who had never spoken to Rose in her entire life. "I always thought you would go for someone more, well, eye-catching." "Rose catches my eye just fine," Thomas replied evenly. "In fact, I find I cannot look away." They drove out to a different part of his property that afternoon, where wildflowers still bloomed despite the autumn chill. Thomas had brought another picnic, and they sat among the flowers talking about everything and nothing. "Does it bother you?" Rose finally asked. "What people say?" "About us? No. Does it bother you? I am used to people commenting on my appearance, or lack thereof, but I worry it will reflect poorly on you." Thomas set down his coffee cup and turned to face her fully. "Rose, I need you to understand something. I do not care what anyone in town thinks about how you look. I do not see what they see. When I look at you, I see intelligence in your eyes. I see strength in the way you hold yourself. I see skill in your hands. I see kindness in how you treat everyone, even the people who do not deserve it. I see beauty in your smile, the real one you give when you forget to be self-conscious. That is what I see. And even if I did not see all that, even if I thought exactly what everyone else seems to think, I would still want to court you because of who you are on the inside. But I am lucky because I get both. I get your beautiful soul and your beautiful face. You really think my face is beautiful? I think everything about you is beautiful. Rose felt tears prick her eyes. No one has ever made me feel the way you do, like I matter. Like I am worth something beyond what I can produce in the bakery. You are worth everything, Rose. I just hope I can prove myself worthy of you. The courtship continued through autumn and into winter. Thomas came to town twice a week now, once for his usual Thursday bakery visit, and once for whatever social event or simple visit he could arrange. Rose found herself laughing more than she had in years, found herself looking forward to each day in a way she never had before. Thomas was not a man of flowery words or grand gestures, but he showed his feelings through steady, consistent actions. He fixed the loose step on the bakery's back stairs without being asked. He brought Rose books he thought she might enjoy. He listened when she talked about wanting to expand the bakery's offerings, maybe add a small tea room where ladies could gather. You should do it, he said. You have the skill and the vision. What is stopping you? Money, mostly. And fear, I suppose. What if I fail? What if you succeed? Rose, you could do anything you set your mind to. I have seen how you work, how you plan, how you execute those plans. You are capable of remarkable things. For Christmas, Thomas gave her a beautiful set of professional baking tools that must have cost him a significant portion of his earnings. Rose gave him a sweater she had knitted herself, working on it late at night after the baking was done, and a special cake decorated with horses that made him laugh with delight. They spent Christmas dinner at the bakery with George, and it was the happiest holiday Rose could remember. Thomas and her father got along wonderfully, talking about everything from horses to business to their shared appreciation of Rose's cooking. You have my blessing, George told Thomas that evening, after Rose had gone upstairs to get something. I know you have not asked yet, but when you do, you have my blessing. Thank you, sir. I want to wait until spring when I can offer her something more than a cold house and hard work. I am adding a room onto the house and I want it finished before I ask her to share my life. She would say yes right now, you know. She loves you. I love her too. More than I knew it was possible to love someone. Rose had heard every word from the top of the stairs, and she stood there with tears streaming down her face and joy overflowing her heart. Winter passed into early spring, and Madisonville slowly adjusted to the reality of Thomas and Rose's courtship. Some people remained critical, but others began to see what Thomas saw. They noticed how Rose lit up when Thomas entered a room. They saw how gentle he was with her, how protective without being possessive. They observed that Rose seemed more confident now, more willing to speak up and share her opinions. I declare, Rose Warren has become almost pretty, Mrs. Henderson said one day, intending it as a compliment. Love suits her. But it was not that Rose had become prettier. It was that she had begun to believe she had worth, and that belief changed how she carried herself, how she interacted with the world. The tea room project moved forward. Thomas helped her draw up plans and secure a small loan from the bank. I will co-sign if you need me to, he offered. No, I want to do this on my own, but thank you for believing I can. I always believe you can do anything you set your mind to. In March, Thomas took Rose to see the addition he had built onto his house. It was a spacious room with large windows facing east to catch the morning light, and Rose gasped when she saw it. Thomas, it is beautiful. What will you use it for? That depends on you. He took both her hands in his, and Rose felt her heart start racing. Rose Warren, these past months with you have been the happiest of my life. Every Thursday I used to count the days until I could see you again, and now I get to see you twice a week, and it still is not enough. I want to see you every day. I want to wake up next to you and fall asleep beside you and spend every moment in between building a life together. He pulled a small box from his pocket and opened it to reveal a simple gold band with a small diamond. This was my grandmother's ring. It is not fancy, but it is real and it is solid, like what I feel for you. Rose, will you marry me? Will you come live with me on the ranch and let me spend the rest of my life proving how much you mean to me? Rose could barely see him through her tears. Yes. Yes, Thomas, I will marry you. I love you so much. He slipped the ring on her finger and it fit perfectly. Then he kissed her, gentle and sweet, and Rose felt like every painful moment of her past had led her to this perfect moment of her present. The engagement announcement caused another wave of gossip through Madisonville, but Rose found she cared less and less what people thought. She was marrying the man she loved, the man who saw her as beautiful and valuable and worthy. That was all that mattered. They set the wedding for May, when the prairie would be covered in wildflowers. Rose made her own wedding cake, naturally, a 3-tiered confection decorated with sugar flowers that looked so real people were tempted to smell them. She sewed her own dress, simple but elegant, in white cotton with lace at the collar and cuffs. Susanna Price made one final attempt at cruelty, stopping by the bakery a week before the wedding. I hope you know what you are getting into, Rose. Thomas Fletcher is a hard man to know. Very quiet, very serious. You will probably die of boredom out on that ranch with no one to talk to. Rose looked at Susanna and felt nothing but pity. Thomas and I talk all the time. We never run out of things to say to each other. I am sorry you cannot imagine a relationship built on more than just surface attraction, but that is your limitation, not mine. Susanna's perfect face flushed red. You think you are so special now, just because one man was desperate enough to court you. But you are still plain Rose Warren underneath all this. You will always be plain. Maybe I am plain, but I am loved, truly and deeply loved by a good man. Can you say the same, Susanna? Susanna turned and swept out without another word, and Rose felt something settle inside her. She was done letting other people's opinions define her worth. The wedding took place on a perfect May morning at the small church in Madisonville. Rose walked down the aisle on her father's arm, and Thomas waited at the altar looking at her like she was the sunrise, the stars, and everything in between. Dearly beloved, Reverend Patterson began, and Rose barely heard the words because she was too focused on Thomas, on the way his eyes never left her face, on the slight smile playing at the corners of his mouth. When it came time for the vows, Thomas's voice was steady and sure. I, Thomas Fletcher, take you, Rose Warren, to be my lawfully wedded wife. I promise to cherish you, to honor you, to support your dreams and hold you through your fears. I promise to see you truly, always, and to remind you of your worth whenever you forget. I promise to love you with everything I am, for as long as I live. Rose's voice shook but did not break. I, Rose Warren, take you, Thomas Fletcher, to be my lawfully wedded husband. I promise to stand beside you through every season. I promise to trust in your love and to give you mine freely. I promise to build a life with you full of laughter and work and simple joys. I promise to love you with my whole heart, now and forever. The kiss they shared was brief and sweet because they were in church, but it held the promise of a lifetime of kisses to come. The reception was held outside the bakery, with tables set up in the street because half the town had turned out despite their previous reservations. George had outdone himself with the food, and Rose's wedding cake was pronounced the finest anyone had ever tasted. "To my daughter and her new husband," George toasted, his eyes bright with tears. "May your love grow sweeter with each passing year, like good bread that only improves with the right care and attention." Thomas and Rose left the reception in late afternoon, riding out to the ranch in the wagon decorated with ribbons and tin cans tied to the back by young Billy Martin and his friends. The sound of clanging followed them out of town, and they laughed like children. The house looked different to Rose now, not as a place she visited but as her home. Thomas carried her over the threshold, and they stood in the front room just holding each other. "Hello, husband," Rose said. "Hello, wife," Thomas replied and kissed her again, longer this time, deeper, full of promise and passion and tenderness all mixed together. That night in the beautiful room Thomas had built for her, Rose learned what it meant to be truly cherished. Thomas was gentle and patient, and when he told her she was beautiful, she finally, completely believed him. The next morning, Rose woke to sunlight streaming through the east-facing windows and Thomas watching her with a soft smile. "Good morning, Mrs. Fletcher." "Good morning." "How long have you been awake?" "A while. I like watching you sleep. You look peaceful." "That is slightly odd, Thomas Fletcher." "I am slightly odd, but you married me anyway." "I did, and I would do it again." They spent the first weeks of marriage settling into rhythms and learning each other in new ways. Rose discovered that Thomas sang while he worked with the horses, always the same 3 songs, and that he was terrible at singing, but it did not stop him. Thomas discovered that Rose liked to bake when she was thinking through problems, and that she talked to her bread dough while she kneaded it. Rose continued working at the bakery 3 days a week, while planning the tea room expansion. Thomas supported her completely, even helping with some of the construction work himself. George was thrilled to have his daughter still involved in the family business, and the 3 of them made an excellent team. The tea room opened in July to surprising success. Ladies who had once mocked Rose now came to enjoy her pastries and tea service, and if they felt hypocritical, they kept it to themselves. Rose hired 2 young women from town to help serve, and she found she enjoyed managing the business side of things as much as the baking itself. "You were right," she told Thomas one evening as they sat on their porch watching the sunset. "I was capable of this. I just needed to believe it." "I am always right," he teased, then laughed when she swatted his arm. "But really, Rose, I am proud of you. You have built something special." "We built it. I could not have done this without your support. We make a good team." "We do." By autumn, Rose realized she was pregnant. She told Thomas on a Thursday evening, the day that would always be special to them because it was when they had first really connected. "I am going to be a father." Thomas's face cycled through shock, joy, fear, and then settled on pure happiness. "Rose, are you certain?" "Yes, I am certain. The baby should come in early spring." Thomas pulled her into his arms and held her like she was the most precious thing in the world. "We are going to have a child, our child, a little person who is part you and part me. Are you happy?" "I am terrified and thrilled and so incredibly happy I could burst." "Are you happy?" "I am everything you are all at once." The pregnancy was not easy. Rose suffered from terrible morning sickness that lasted well into the afternoon, and her feet swelled so badly by January that she could barely wear shoes. But Thomas was there for every moment, bringing her ginger tea and rubbing her feet, and never once complaining when she woke him at 2 in the morning, because she desperately needed pickles and cheese together. The baby came on a warm April morning during a thunderstorm. Thomas rode into town at dangerous speed to fetch the midwife, Mrs. Patterson, while Rose labored with her father holding her hand. "You are doing wonderfully, Rose girl," George kept saying. Just like your mother, strong and brave. Thomas made it back with Mrs. Patterson, and he stayed beside Rose throughout the entire process, letting her squeeze his hand until his fingers went numb. When their son finally arrived, red-faced and screaming his displeasure at the world, Thomas wept openly. "A boy," Mrs. Patterson announced. "A healthy, strong boy." "Let me see him," Rose gasped, and when they placed her son in her arms, she felt something shift fundamentally in her heart. This tiny, perfect person was half her and half Thomas, and he was beautiful. "What shall we name him?" Thomas asked, gently touching the baby's dark hair. "I was thinking Samuel, after the man who gave you your start. Samuel George Fletcher. It is perfect. He is perfect. You are perfect." Thomas kissed Rose's forehead. "My whole world is in this room right now." Samuel proved to be a happy baby, easygoing and curious. He had Thomas's dark hair and Rose's brown eyes, and both grandparents were absolutely besotted with him. George closed the bakery for a week just to come stay at the ranch and help with the new baby. Rose discovered that motherhood suited her. She was patient and practical, approaching each challenge with the same methodical care she brought to baking. Thomas was a devoted father, singing his terrible songs to Samuel and carrying the baby around the ranch while explaining everything about horses and cattle and growing things. Life settled into a new normal. Rose went back to the bakery part-time once Samuel was old enough, bringing him with her and letting him sleep in a basket in the corner while she worked. The tea room continued to thrive, and Thomas's horse breeding business was more successful each year. 2 years later, their daughter arrived. Margaret Rose Fletcher came into the world on a quiet autumn evening, calm and observant from her first breath. Where Samuel had been all energy and noise, Margaret was thoughtful and quiet, watching everything with wide blue eyes that came from Thomas's side of the family. "We make good children," Thomas said, holding Margaret while Samuel climbed all over his legs. "We do," Rose agreed. "Should we try for more? As many as you want, as long as you are willing to grow them." They had one more child 3 years later, another boy they named Henry after Thomas's father. Henry was somewhere between his siblings in temperament, playful but not wild, curious but capable of sitting still. The house Thomas had built expanded over the years to accommodate their growing family, each addition made with care and planning. Rose's Bakery became a fixture in Madisonville, the tea room a popular gathering place for ladies from all over the county. George eventually retired and turned the business over to Rose completely, spending his remaining years playing with his grandchildren and teaching them everything he knew about baking. When George died peacefully in his sleep at age 72, surrounded by family, Rose grieved deeply but took comfort in the legacy he had left. The bakery he had built, the skills he had taught her, the love he had shown her throughout her life, these were gifts that would carry forward through generations. Thomas and Rose grew older together, weathering all the storms that life brought. There were hard years when drought killed their crops and they had to dig into savings to survive. There were illnesses and injuries, times when money was tight and worry kept them awake at night. But through everything, they had each other. On their 25th wedding anniversary, Thomas took Rose back to the spot where he had proposed, where the wildflowers still bloomed each spring. They were both grayer now, marked by the years and the work of building a life together. "Do you remember what I said to you that first day I came into the bakery and really spoke to you?" Thomas asked. "You said I had a gift for creating beauty. I also said you were the most beautiful woman I had ever seen. That is still true, Rose, more true now than ever. I look at you and I see every year we have spent together. I see the mother you have become, the businesswoman, the partner, the friend. I see how you have grown and changed and become even more yourself, and I fall in love with you more deeply every single day." Rose took his face in her hands, hands that were marked with age spots and scars from a lifetime of work. "I love you, Thomas Fletcher. You gave me the greatest gift anyone ever gave me. You taught me to see myself through loving eyes. You showed me that I was beautiful, not despite who I am, but because of who I am. Every good thing in my life came from believing in that truth. I just saw what was already there. You saw what no one else could see. That made all the difference." They kissed there among the wildflowers, two people who had built something lasting out of quiet devotion and steady love. Their children grew and had families of their own. Samuel took over the horse breeding operation, expanding it into one of the finest in the region. Margaret became a teacher, bringing her mother's patience and her father's steady presence to educating Madisonville's children. Henry went east to study medicine and came back as the town's doctor, setting up practice in the building next to his mother's bakery. Rose and Thomas became grandparents, then great-grandparents, their family tree spreading wide and strong. The house on the ranch was always full of noise and laughter, children of various ages running through the rooms and playing in the fields. On their 50th wedding anniversary, the entire town of Madisonville threw them a celebration. Even Susanna Price attended, now Susanna Hartford after 3 marriages and divorces. She approached Rose hesitantly during the party. "Rose, I wonder if I might speak with you privately." They stepped away from the crowd, and Susanna looked older than her years, worn down by choices that had not served her well. "I wanted to apologize for how I treated you all those years ago. I was cruel and petty, and you did not deserve it. Thank you for saying that, Susanna. I forgive you. You have built such a beautiful life. Thomas was the best man in town, and I was too foolish to see it, too focused on surface things to recognize substance." She smiled sadly. "I have been married and divorced 3 times, and I never felt a fraction of what I see when I watch you and Thomas together. It is not too late for you to find happiness, Susanna. Real happiness, the kind built on truth and respect. Maybe, maybe not. But I am glad you found it, Rose, truly." The party continued late into the evening, with music and dancing and toasts from friends and family. Thomas, now 76 years old but still strong and capable, danced with Rose under the stars just as they had on their wedding night 50 years before. 50 years, Rose marveled. "Half a century with you, Thomas Fletcher. Best 50 years any man could ask for. Here is to 50 more. I do not think we have 50 more in us, my love. Then we will make the most of whatever time we have left, just like we always have." They swayed together in the moonlight, and Rose felt the same flutter in her chest she had felt that first Thursday when Thomas told her she had a gift for creating beauty. Some feelings, the true ones, never diminished with age. They only grew deeper and more precious. Thomas and Rose lived into their 80s, still working their ranch with help from their children and grandchildren. Rose still baked occasionally, though her hands were stiff with arthritis, and she had to take frequent breaks. Thomas still worked with the horses, moving slower but with the same patient skill he had always possessed. They died within 6 months of each other. Thomas first after a brief illness, and Rose following during the next spring as if she could not bear to see another season without him. They were buried side by side in the Madisonville cemetery, their headstone reading simply, "Thomas Fletcher and Rose Warren Fletcher, beloved husband and wife, together in life and death." At Rose's funeral, their son Samuel stood before the gathered crowd and spoke about his parents. "My mother spent her youth believing she was plain and ordinary. She thought her value came only from her work, from what she could produce. Then my father saw her truly, saw the beauty that was always there, but that she could not see in herself. He loved her into believing her own worth. And from that love came everything else. A family, a business, a legacy that touches everyone in this town. My parents proved that real beauty is not what you see with your eyes, but what you recognize with your heart. They built their lives on that truth, and the world is better for it. The bakery continued for 3 more generations, each adding their own touches but preserving Rose's original recipes and her commitment to quality and care. The tea room remained a gathering place where women came not just for pastries, but for the sense of welcome and belonging that Rose had cultivated. The ranch stayed in the family, Samuel's descendants continuing Thomas's work with horses and expanding into other livestock. In Madisonville, Texas, the story of Thomas and Rose became the kind of tale people told to remind themselves what mattered. Not the surface attractions that faded with time, but the deep recognition of another soul's worth. Not the grand gestures that burned bright and quick, but the steady devotion that built something lasting. Years after both Thomas and Rose had passed, a young woman stood in what had been Rose's bakery, looking at an old photograph on the wall. It showed Thomas and Rose on their 50th anniversary, standing together with their family arrayed around them. The woman, a descendant visiting from back east, studied Rose's face in the photograph. Was she really considered plain? She asked the current bakery owner, Rose's great-granddaughter. That is what they say. But look at her in this picture. Look at how she is looking at her husband. Look at the joy in her eyes. That is not a woman who feels plain. That is a woman who knows she is loved. And he really did love her. It was not just a marriage of convenience. He loved her more than anything in the world. There are letters in the family archive, letters Thomas wrote to Rose when he had to travel for business. They will make you cry. They are so full of devotion. He thought she was beautiful from the day he met her until the day he died. That is the kind of love everyone should have. Yes. And my great-grandmother would tell you that it starts with seeing yourself through loving eyes. Thomas gave her that gift, but she had to accept it. She had to choose to believe she was worthy of love. Once she did, everything else followed. The young woman looked at the photograph again, and this time she saw what Thomas had always seen. Not the measurements of features or the arrangement of physical attributes, but the light of a soul that had found its match, the beauty of a woman who had learned her own worth and built a life of meaning and love. In the end, that was the real story of Rose and Thomas Fletcher. Not that a quiet rancher had looked past plainness to find inner beauty, but that he had seen beauty where others were too blind to look. And in seeing her truly, he had helped Rose see herself truly. And that vision had transformed not just her life, but the lives of everyone their love touched, rippling forward through generations like light spreading across a prairie morning, steady and warm and transforming everything it reached. The flour dust still caught in the morning light streaming through the bakery window, just as it had more than 60 years ago. But now, it illuminated a different generation, carrying forward the legacy of a woman who had learned she was beautiful and a man who had known it all along. Their love story was complete, perfect in its simplicity and depth, a testament to the transformative power of truly seeing and truly being seen, of loving and allowing yourself to be loved in return. They had built something that lasted, not because it was perfect, but because it was real, and that reality was the most beautiful thing of all.